Greetings, everybody. I was a little concerned there for a second because the delay between StreamYards and YouTube was almost the full 30 seconds of the countdown. So was a little worried we might not actually be going live at all, but it appears like everything is working and everything is fine. The reason for today's live stream, pretty simple. There's a category that we kind of meant to get to, and we touched upon a lot of it last night on the spacing. And if you haven't caught that stream, please, by all means, go back and watch that as after you're done watching this. But one of the subjects that we intended to cover in detail was this article. And part of the reason we didn't is because people like me on the panel just are incapable of ever shutting up. And so we didn't really get into the specifics of the article. I still wanted to do that because I still think it's important that we dissect this article and people understand, and not only understand, but are able to kind of like articulate to other people what the issues are with articles like this and YouTubers who purport to use them to confirm their theories and other such nonsense. Because we've been playing this game for quite a while in this griftosphere. This idea that, you know, these articles that are essentially quoting back video, it's so you have the one pipeline, which is kind of like the bounding into comics pipeline, right? So bounding or some other similar site, but mostly bounding, and at least it has been in the past. Pardon me, with a hold back a sneeze here. Yeah, sorry, should mute that. But you know, they'd come out with an article, and then you know, every YouTuber and their brother, uncle's former roommate would create a video covering and reading to you that very article. So you'd end up with bounding into comics to publish an article, and then 50 YouTubers would make videos, myself included, and people I stream with included. And, you know, and those people aren't bad people necessarily, just because they use the bounding into comics article, but that was the routine, right? So some story would break, bounding would do an article, and then everybody would pull up bounding and they'd do a video on it, or they'd do a live stream and cover the bounding into comics article. Standard fare. Now we're getting a little bit of the flip of that, which is that some YouTubers are getting tractions with some of their theories and stories and things like that. And these websites are producing articles with the intent of being then recited and generating clicks through the YouTubers who they are parroting. Not parodying, parroting. So I could come up, for example, if I came up with a video and said, like, well, you know, my theory is the earth is flat. Here's the reasons why. And I'm talking about a YouTube stream. Somebody working over for some website sees that my video got a lot of views and be like, well, if I talk about this very viral video or this popular video made by this popular person, then they're going to make a video talking about me talking about their video. And then I'm going to get tractions and clicks to my article. See how that works, everybody? Like, it's kind of like this circular, you know, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours scenario and handshake between some of these website authors and some of these YouTubers. And it doesn't have to be something that's formalized and you know, like they're agreeing behind the scenes or some weird, strange kind of contract or anything like. No, it can be completely informal and something that just happens, but it just happens to benefit both of them, right? And particularly lately, I've noticed within the last year, Forbes has been the common kind of go-to in this regard. And so we have this article that was recently published on Forbes. And that article is, I'm going to scroll to the top of it here. Disney Star Wars box office profits fail to cover costs of buying Lucasfilm. And of course, that's the article. And we're going to go into some details of that. But again, and I said this on last night's spacing, that's not really even a significant measure or a metric that you would evaluate an investment or a company on, that they would have to turn enough cash profit to cover their initial investment in the acquisition of another company. So, like, because the things that factor in is like you're buying it. A company is an asset. Think of it as just a brick of paper money that you're buying this asset. This brick doesn't lose value once you like it costs you money to acquire it, but it then doesn't get used up. It still has value. And so the revenue that you're generating minus the operating costs of continuing to run it don't have to pay for the acquisition of the asset because you still have that asset on your ledger. The only time it would be required maybe is if that asset lost value, meaning you purchased it for $10 and now it's only worth 5. All right, then you'd be like, well, you had if you were to sell it today, and that's only if you were to sell it today, then you would lose half of your initial investment. So the income that you made off of that asset during the time that you held it would, in order for you to break even, would have to make up that cost difference. There's no Hi, Mark. Wow, I see it. There's no reason that Lucasfilm or Disney needs to make $4 billion. Because I mean, and I mentioned it last night. Imagine we now apply that to the acquisition of Fox or their or Disney or Discovery's acquisition of Warner Brothers. Now we're talking like way more than $4 billion here. We're talking like I think Warner Brothers is $43 billion or $46 billion, right? So you'd say like, well, okay, if they take half of that revenue from the box office home, then they need to make $92 billion at the box office to cover their acquisition costs of Warner Brothers. But that's nobody's measuring the success or failure of an acquisition in that way. So right from right from the start, this is kind of a skewed article. Like right from the start. This isn't like nobody's evaluating, get off there, this investment in that way, except for people who want to make Disney look bad because that gets them clicks on their channel, and that gets them those people that want to hear this news. It gets people to read the article. So we'll have Caroline Reed. You can look at her history on Forbes. You can just, if you click on the author, you get it brings up a list of articles. We won't do that here because I don't want to lose my place. But she has written a number of articles having to do with films that were produced in the United Kingdom, where they have to disclose that sort of the budget information to the public for the purposes of the tax credits they receive. So in the UK, like many other municipalities in the world, in several states in the United States, I know that Canada's got they have film credits, right? And these film credits require you to spend so much of your production budget in their location, and then they give you money back for it. So like if you spend $100 million there and the deal is we'll give you 25% of your budget back, as long as you spend 10% of your budget here, you could get a credit of $25 million if you spent $100 million, which substantially reduces the cost of the film, right? And these are these are tax credits. The studios don't just like go like, and now we don't want that money. No, they're very aggressive in pursuing them. One of the tricks is because you're getting a tax credit. The way these generally works is that you have to report the information to the public because the tax credits are an expense from the public coffers. So there's some level of accountability. And so when Disney produces movies over in the UK, or any studio really produces movies over in the UK, They create these companies that encompass the entire production. So they spin off and create a new corporation, and the corporation is usually some code name. Um, and within that corporation, all the accounting, the ledger for the production and distribution and everything related to the movie is contained within that one. So one, it keeps the main company isolated from some liability issues, and it also makes the accounting for the purposes of taxes and all this stuff much easier. Um, and then of course litigation after the fact regarding the finances of the film, which is something that happens quite regularly in Hollywood because studios like to pretend that none of their movies make money so they don't have to pay the actors or directors any back end payments per the terms of their contract. Anyway, she has discovered this, and she has written a number of articles that give this information as if she's some sort of discovered some sort of secret. Scrimmager says, I will be honest, I'm not a follower of Star Wars news lately. No idea what is this article. Guess they lied and people took the wrong conclusion from it. Yeah. Scrimmager, that basically it. Or the end truth might be there. Like, and here's the thing. Like, I have no way of knowing if Disney Star Wars profits have covered the cost of buying Lucasfilm or not. And frankly, neither do these people, but they purport to. My suspicion is that it hasn't, but I don't know how it could, given that Star Wars has been a Disney Plus property for a number of years now. And I don't know how any of that gets accounted for. If Lucasfilm has its own ledger, I don't know what sort of like income they're receiving from Disney Plus subscription revenue that would cover or not cover their production costs of the shows that they're making. I suspect not cover because Disney Plus itself loses money because it's enormously expensive to start up and run a streaming service. But do I suspect that they've made $4 billion in cash profit from since purchasing Lucasfilm? Probably not. I don't think it matters because I don't think the company's worth $0 right now. So I think like there's still, I'm not ready to say that like this was a bad investment either. So, but my point is like they don't know, they can't know. But they're using very strong language, like confirmed and other such nonsense to be like, well, this article here proves that Disney, ha ha ha, Disney hasn't made its money back from Star Wars. Okay. Well, let's go through it. So box office profits generated by Disney Star Wars movies have fallen 2.8 billion short of covering the media giant's purchase of the sci-fi saga creator Lucasfilm, according to analysis of recently filed financial statements. Disney bought Lucasfilm for $4 billion in 2012, and that's, they purchased it with cash and stock, and it wasn't 4 billion square in cash either, but okay, we'll give her the benefit of rounding. Yeah, skirmisher, basically. So some people that can't prove it, but they're selling it as the truth because it's the truth that people, it's the quote unquote truth that people want to hear, that oh, Disney's losing, we're winning. And I just don't think that's the reality. And I'm going to push back on that because these people are setting themselves up to be some sort of financial analysis experts. And almost all the things they're doing is just wild ass guesswork. But we'll get into it. So Disney bought Lucasfilm for $4 billion in 2012 and soon gave the green light to a new trilogy of Star Wars movies, which teamed up rising stars Daisy Ridley and John Boyega with Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, and late Carrie Fisher, who headlined the original movies more than 30 years earlier. All the stars aligned when The Force Awakens, the first film in the new series, was released in 2015. According to industry analysis Box Office Mojo, it grossed a staggering 2.1 billion, causing Disney to commission two spin-off movies as well as two sequels that were already planned. However, as the series continued, there was a disturbance in the force due to an over-reliance on computer-generated effects and a lack of the gritty, quirky characters who made the originals movies smash hits. Now, so this is supposed to be an analysis of the financial state of Disney, and right here we just have a wildly speculative theory as to why the movies were slipped in sales revenue versus the Force Awakens. An over reliance on computer generated effects. That's that's a shot people take at the prequels, but I don't recall that being a major complaint to be like, oh, it's too CGI. Um, no, like the story was disjointed and kind of sucked. Was the main issue. There was nothing to root for in those sequel movies. But like I don't know why you'd insert that into the middle of that. Just some editorial like jab at like anti CGI. And it's just weird for that to be in this article, but I don't think this is a very professional journalist in the first place. So we'll continue. In 2019, The Rise of Skywalker, the third installment, misspelled, in the new trilogy, hauled in around half as much at the box office as The Force Awakens, though the series soon had a renaissance. Just a few weeks before the first case of COVID-19 was discovered in December 2019, Disney debuted its first Star Wars streaming series, The Mandalorian. Yeah, it is a weird take, Screamer Tara. I've watched I don't know how many hours of videos critiquing the sequel trilogy, and like over reliance on CGI. I don't think has come up that I can recall like ever. That is just weird. It was an instant success thanks to unlikely pairing of the protagonists. The series is named after a gruff armor-clad bounty hunter played by Pedro Pascal, who is tasked with tracking down the family of a pointy-eared green alien, Grogu, who wasn't named Grogu until season 2, I believe. Yes, he was named in the Jedi episode with Ahsoka Tano in season 2. Photos of the cute character went viral because of its resemblance to beloved Star Wars sage Yoda. Partially, the fact that it was green and Yoda-like, I think more to do with that it was just a cute fucking baby. Personally, I despise the creature from the get-go, but again, we're offering our theories here as a journalist as to why this was successful without really offering like any evidence or proof. Like if I wanted to make the case and I'm a journalist, I would say like, look, you know, sales of Baby Yoda merchandise were sold out or sold this many $1 million or had this much of a back order issue or like, I'd put something in there that kind of locked down that number. But the timing couldn't have been better as it thrust The Mandalorian into the spotlight just as the world went into lockdown. Well, okay. The Mandalorian debuted in December of 2019, she said. I don't think so because the final episode debuted like the week that Rise of Skywalker came out in theaters. And I remember that specifically because of the whole Force healing thing. Grogu did it in chapter 8 of the season 1 of Mandalorian. That was chapter 8 in mid-December, which means that the show came out in November and was wrapped up before Christmas even. The lockdowns didn't occur till March. So it thrust the Mandalorian into the spotlight just as the world went into lockdown is provably false, incorrect, wrong. You have your dates wrong on the premiere of the show. And while later it was discovered that cases of COVID were initially found and kind of went unreported or under the radar way back in the fall and early winter of 2020, lockdowns didn't occur until fucking March, 3 months later, 3 full months later. So you're wrong on your timeline, Tuts. Yeah, sorry, December 2019. You're correct. December 2019. But I remember chapter 8 when he heals Grief Karga. That was the episode that aired just before Rise of Skywalker came out. In which case Rey uses Force Heal to not only heal Kylo Ren, but also the weird snake thingy that they encountered. So, yes, 2019, COVID lockdowns didn't occur until March of 2020. So, this lady, it's wrong. You're wrong. Your timing is wrong. That wasn't what happened. Viewers were stuck indoors for the majority of the following year, leading to a surge in subscriptions to the Disney Plus streaming platform. Again, I don't know if the surge in subscriptions to the Disney Plus platform was related. Like, I'm sure COVID certainly helped the world being on lockdown, but like, wouldn't that also create a surge in everybody else's streaming platforms? I mean, the fact that The Mandalorian was a popular show and it was generating, buzz because of Grogu, which wasn't called Baby Yoda at the time because Grogu wasn't named until season 2. I don't know if I would put it be like it was The Mandalorian necessarily that did it or COVID. I mean, it was both those things helped for sure though. But again, nothing really quantified. The Mandalorian was watched more than any other show, and according to Nielsen, it racked up 5.4 billion minutes of viewing time during its 7-week run, peaking at one. That's right, because there was 2 episodes aired at once, so it was eight chapters, seven different weeks, peaking at 1.2 billion during the week its finale aired. It didn't just appeal to fans, but critics too. Audience awarded The Mandalorian a 92% rating on review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes, worthless, whilst critics went even further with a score of 93. Wow. In fact, the industry liked it so much that it was nominated for 6 Primetime Emmy Awards and 42 Primetime Creative Arts Emmy Awards, winning in 15 categories. Okay. That's nice. I wouldn't say that everything Disney gets nominated. Like Book of Boba Fett got a bunch of nominations, but I can't quote you how many, so we won't get into it. But okay, I'll grant you that. Unsurprisingly, it was renewed for 2 further seasons, and they were planned in the first place. Its own spin-off series, The Book of Boba Fett, which was already in the works and a product of a decision was made to turn the series into or the movie into a series, I believe, which is also the case with Obi-Wan. But the only reason that a 4th season of The Mandalorian hasn't gone into production is that the movie, based on its 2 stars, is due to be released in 2026. It doesn't stop there. Okay. But remember that, season 2 and season 3 had a long wait in between them. It took them a long while to get to season 3. The show's success spurred the development of a suite of new Star Wars productions. Since it debuted, 3 other streaming shows have been released, and 3 more movies are in development, in addition to The Mandalorian and Grogu. Well, okay. The declining interest in Disney's initial trilogy of movies seemed like a distant memory, and the mouse has made the most of it. Last month, Disney released a 67-page presentation singing the praises of its chief executive, Bob Iger, in a bid to convince stockholders to side with him in a battle with activist investors. One of its key boasts was about the supposedly spellbinding return on investment generated by the franchises that Disney acquired under Iger. The presentation gives the impression that Disney's Star Wars trilogy generated 2.9 times return on the purchase of Lucasfilm, as that figure is presented next to a timeline of events in the production company's history. They include the release of Disney movies and the acquisition of Lucasfilm, which is the only milestone marked with a star. Adding to this impression is the fact, I'm sorry, I lost my spot here, that the other end of the timeline is the Star Wars logo and a photo of the Mandalorian with his little green friend. However, buried in the fine print is the revelation that the purchase price of Lucasfilm isn't included in the return on investment calculation. Yeah, and that's nothing special, actually, because the shareholders, like the acquisition of Lucasfilm's kind of baked in the cake. They want to know like what the money is returning now. So like what they're spending in operating costs to develop the program to get the revenue that they're generating. So I wouldn't normally expect the acquisition cost of Lucasfilm to be included in a running ROI projection, simply because that's not part of its ongoing cost. That was a fixed one-time cost, the acquisition, and that would only really come into play if they were to sell it for less than what they acquired it for. Because if they sold it for more, let's say somebody came along and said, "Hey, Disney, I'll give you 8 billion for it." They say like, well, we made $4 billion return on our acquisition of it. But the return on investment part from an investor standpoint generally is going to be your operating expenses relative to your revenue that you're generating. Like how much is the revenue you're generating? How much does that revenue cost to generate? Typically what investors are concerned about. So like this author's making it seem like, oh, Disney's pulling like a fast one on people, but they're really not. That's pretty standard. And I think especially your institutional investors, they're not retards. They kind of can figure that out. As revealed in this hyperlink, the methodology is questionable as Disney based the ROA on the average revenue generated by the movies, merchandise, DVDs, and Blu-rays rather than the profit they made, as it should have done. Using the revenue rather than the profit artificially inflates the result as it doesn't factor in the cost that Disney had to pay out. Well, you're specifically talking about the acquisition costs. The other costs are in there. Even if this wasn't enough, the media giant Even this wasn't enough for the media giant, so it also forecast the revenue it expected the Star Wars movies, merchandise, DVDs, and Blu-rays to generate over a 10-year period. Yes, because there's ongoing revenue that's associated with the stuff that they already made. Again, I don't think that anybody was surprised to be like, yeah, the future merchandise and DVD, Blu-ray licenses and things like that are going to continue to generate revenue at a much further reduced cost because like yes, there is cost. Like so like if Turner Broadcasting Network TBS decides that they want to air the Star Wars movies on their channel um, in May for Star Wars month, right? They're gonna put that on TV. Well, they're gonna have to pay Lucasfilm, Disney, some money to do that. They can't just like put it on the air, sell advertising during it, and not pay Disney anything, right? So there's going to be revenue, but there's going to be some small costs on Disney's side, very, very minute, but it'll be there in that, somebody's going to have to review the terms and negotiate the contract and deal with the paperwork about that. And then there's potential back end payments out there as well. So like in order to sign Harrison Ford, for example, to do Rise of Skywalker, they had to offer him X percent of royalty deals off the back end or any future DVD or licensing sales. Well, okay, here's a licensing sale. So he's got to get his cut. There's going to be costs associated with that. So anytime that they sell these things and there's back end deals, which by terms of most of the Hollywood's contracts, there are some royalty pays. I mean, that was one of the sticking points in that whole uh, uh, the strikes and everything that occurred last year was that revenue. Because for a lot of actors, because of streaming, that revenue disappeared. Because it wasn't because these companies were airing it on their own networks, so they weren't charging themselves to air their own product. Therefore, there was no percentage to give to the actors or the directors or the people that would otherwise get payouts. And that was a sticking point in their negotiations. Right. So there's always going to be additional payouts as anytime there's revenue coming in. Hey, Tim. Nice to see you. Scrimmage says there's a retarded rumor about the Arab or the king would buy for $8 billion, if you remember. Yeah. In which case would just blow this whole thing out of the water, right? Because then they bought it for twice as much or sold it for twice as much as they bought it for, which would mean that, it was a pretty good investment. But we'll continue. In other words, Disney hasn't actually received the revenue that it used to calculate the return on investment. Well, no, it's projected revenue. Right. And in their statements and stock filings and everything, they file those too. And then if it's off, they have to issue corrections, and they do that. Usually corporations do that through the course of the year. That's, again, this article is making it sound like this is some shady, non-standard thing. I think it's pretty standard. Like, companies are always projecting revenue in their press releases and their financial statements. They're kind of required to, actually. In summary, despite seeming to do so, Disney's presentation doesn't actually reveal whether its Star Wars movies has covered the cost of its purchase of Lucasfilm. There may be good reason for this. One, yes, there is a great reason for this. They're not required to, and no real investor cares about that. They'll care about the value of Lucasfilm if they spin it off or sell it, because then that impacts the sale price. But right now, it's just a held asset. They care about whether that held asset is generating more revenue than its cost. That's what they care about. Or that, hey, maybe if somebody did want to come along and buy it for a ridiculous price, then they would be advocating for that, because, that would make their company make Disney more valuable, and as shareholders, they would benefit. Anyway, analysis of more than 800 pages of company filings has revealed that the cost of making Disney's 5 Star Wars movies has hit a total of $2.1 billion, peaking at $567.3 million on The Force Awakens. However, that's just the start. Hey, finally, we're getting some numbers. Mindful of this blockbuster budget, Disney devised an ingenious way to make money back on the movie. Instead of shooting it in the United States, it chose Pinewood Studios in the United Kingdom, where the original trilogy of films was made. Lucasfilm invented the tax credit, guys. They're the first ones. See how shady they are? They devised an ingenious way to make money. Film credits are not something new. They've been luring studios to Georgia for years. They've been luring film to Vancouver and Toronto for years for tax credits. And I believe Lord of the Rings got tax credits way back in 2000 from fucking New Zealand. Like, this is they devised a scheme. No, they utilized a common tax incentive. This is like talking to like your brother or sister and be like, they devised a scheme to obtain a tax credit for their children. Yeah, they did. They took a standard deduction. Bastards. Instead of shooting in the United States, they choose Pinewood Studios in the United Kingdom, where the original trilogy of films was made. This enabled it to benefit from the UK government audiovisual expenditure credit, which gives the studios a cash reimbursements up to 25.5% of the money they spend in the UK, provided that it represents at least 10% of the film's total costs. Yes, it's Caroline something, Tim, but I will scroll up. Caroline Reed. Now I got to find this. Okay. Up to 25.5% of the money spent in the UK, provided that it represents at least 10% of the film's total cost. At the start of this year, the UK government slightly raised the reimbursement ceiling from 25.5 or from 25% in the face of competition from other countries which are offering similar schemes. It has helped to make the UK a dream ticket for movie makers, and according to the British Film Institute, foreign studios contributed around 77% of the 1.8 billion spent on making films in the country last year. With so much at stake, Disney didn't take any chances and got endorsement from the UK government right from the start. In 2014, Treasury Secretary George Osborne proudly announced that Pinewood would not just be home to The Force Awakens, but also to its two sequels. This will mean more jobs and more investment. It is great news for the people working at Pinewood Studios, from the set designers to the carpenters. Yes, crony capitalism at its finest, people. The production also had an impact for farther afield. Sets featuring the iconic Millennium Falcon X-Wing spaceships were built at Royal Air Force Base around 55 miles west of London. The mountainous Lake District region of the North England was setting for the planet of Takodana. That's Maz Kanata's place, right? Hiding place for the sword-like lightsaber weapon belonged to Hamill's Luke Skywalker character. Using local staff wasn't the only catch that came with the generous fiscal incentives. Movie budgets are usually a closely guarded secret. Studios tend to absorb the cost of individual pictures in their overall expenses and don't itemize how much they spend on each one. But they release press releases about all of them because they want people to see that there's, hey, look, we invested in this film. It's a selling point. However, the cost of the movies made in the UK are consolidated in single companies which file annual financial statements showing the cash reimbursement, headcount, salaries, total expenses, and more. The production companies usually have code names so they don't raise attention while filming permits. Like this, she copy pasted this probably out of like 10 of her articles, I swear to God. The production companies usually have code names so they don't raise attention when filing for permits to shoot off site. The Disney subsidiary behind The Force Awakens is named Foodles Production after the cafe next to the San Rafael, California headquarters of Kerner Optical, the original practical effects division of Lucasfilm Industrial Light and Magic VFX firm. A condition of receiving the cash reimbursement is that the companies must be responsible for everything from pre-production to delivery of the movie and paying for services related to the finished film. It is one of the reasons why Foodles is still booking costs in its financial statements more than 8 years after The Force Awakens released. Yes, so anytime that if they do a new Blu-ray release and they commission an artist to make the new cover, it's going to get billed there. Any sort of ongoing costs related to the film that they can file there and then potentially get a tax credit back for, they're going to file there and try and get a tax credit for. That's just good business. Another reason is the companies often file the financial statements around a year after the period they cover. This is why the latest results for Foodles were filed in December 2023 are for the year ending December 31st, 2022. During that period, the company spent $3.5 million, bringing in the total budget for The Force Awakens to a massive $567.3 million. Surprisingly, this isn't more than Disney expected, as financial statements noted that at the year end, the estimated total cost was within budget. Salaries alone came to $22.7 million, with staff numbers peaking at 258, without even including freelancers and self-employed workers who make up the majority of the crew. Then comes the cash reimbursements, which was a whopping $92.2 million, bringing the movie's net cost down to $475.1 million. As we revealed in Britain's Sunday Times newspaper last year, including the streaming shows, Disney has received more than $410 million in reimbursements from the UK government. No wonder Disney thanked Osborne in the credits for The Force Awakens and gave him several replica lightsabers. No shit. The second biggest budget was for 2019's The Rise of Skywalker, which cost $542.4 million to make. On the other end of the spectrum was the two Star Wars spin-off movies were also made in the UK. Rogue One is a prequel to the first Star Wars film, while Solo tells the origin story of Ford's Han Solo character. Several of the Star Wars Disney Plus streaming series were also made in the UK, so their costs are known, but unlike the movies, their profit cannot be calculated. This is because Disney Plus subscribers pay a single fee, which grants them access to all of its content, making it impossible to determine how much subscription revenue is generated specific shows. It is impossible to determine how much subscription revenue is generated specific shows. Generated by specific shows? Good job, Caroline. In contrast, if they had been screened at the theater, viewers would have had to pay separately to watch them all. Yes, that's streaming. Thank you. Theater chains typically get around half of the takings. Right here. Okay. So we're getting some math, right? And I'm going to break from the article here, and we're gonna go through this. Like, in order to determine how much money Disney has made or lost on Star Wars, you have to know a lot of things. You have to have access to a lot of financial data and contracts that these people don't have access to. So right off the top here, we're talking about the she's going to explain that, yeah, the theaters take a cut of the box office receipts. So when something makes $1 billion at the box office, that doesn't mean the studio gets $1 billion. The exhibitors, the people who are showing the movies, aka the theater owners, get a substantial cut of that ticket price. The idea that movie theaters only make revenue off of popcorn and soda is a lie. They make money off the ticket sales. Now, that is determined on a case by case, theater by theater basis. There is not one contract to rule them all when it comes to exhibition of even one title in one country. Now you're talking about global box office here. So we're talking about a movie. We'll just talk about Force Awakens. Force Awakens, $2.1 billion, she says, right? Well, that wasn't just in America. That was worldwide, $2.1 billion. How much the theaters, she just says, well, they took around half. Well, okay. Around half. What if it's 49.51? 1% of 2.1 billion is not a small number. And this is just Force Awakens. And that's just a 1% swing. Right? 1% of $1 billion is 10 million, right? Yeah. All right, so $20 million right there, 1%. So if Disney were, and that's if you just say half, and this is good for just ballparking something, right? You want to talk about a week to week, the box office revenue on your show and everything like that. Yeah, a ballpark is fine, but we're talking like we're getting specifics to the point where we're going through and explaining minute $1 million additional costs, right? That are being booked under these companies 8 years later for a couple $1 million. So when you're digging that level down, you cannot simply back of the napkin guesstimate the theatrical split of a $2.1 billion movie and have credibility. So even with the box office number, which is the most provable number that's published, you still don't know because you don't know what that split was. Because Disney has a history of being pretty nasty to theater chains when it comes to negotiating terms. And by the way, these terms aren't just for location per screen for each individual title, it's by day. So over the course of a theatrical run, the split changes. So in the first week, typically the distributor, the film studio, gets a much larger percent of the box office than the third week, the fourth week, the fifth week, and so on and so forth. Also, the majority of the money is generated for most movies, especially nowadays, in those first 2 weeks. A rule of thumb is it works out and it washes out to be about half, okay? But even where that revenue is generated, is it generated in India versus China or the UK? Like if it's the UK, you're going to get more money. If it's the India, you ain't going to get shit. If it's China, you ain't going to get shit compared to the United States or the UK. So these things matter. And these things are not knowable unless you have access to the contracts and that data. I'm sure somebody at Disney has access to it and they could pull it up. Hey, what was our final? I'm sure somebody in their accounting division would be like, hey, we can look it up. Like, hey, what was the final percent split theatrical on The Force Awakens in 2015, heading into 2016? They could probably tell you. These people, they can say they have sources. Yeah, Sparrow has it. Eclay, welcome. Sparrow has it. Eclay says, yeah, I'm sure he doesn't. So when I say when I said initially, like these are things that these authors and these YouTubers can't know. There's a reason why I said they can't know, because they can't know. They don't know. This is a ballpark. And when you're dealing with numbers as big as these, ballparking plus or minus a couple percent on the box office take is a big impact on that final number. And this, like I said, this is the most provable one. The other ones they're just flat out pure fucking guess. All right, so we'll continue. In 2017, its 2017 sequel, The Last Jedi, had I missed that thing. Theater chains typically get around half the takings, which the remainder going to the studios, deducting the $475 million net cost from The Force Awakens from Disney's share of the box office, leaves the blockbuster profit of $559.6 million. This is 1.2 times its net cost, giving the Disney a 1.2 times return on investment. And it really kind of depends how you want to look at that number too. So if something costs $10 and you make $11 a profit, which means you ended up with like $21 total, would you say you made 1.1 times your money back, or would you say you doubled your money? Right. Well, it depends on the spin you want to put on the article, right? You're going to say 1.2 because that sounds like, ooh, they only made a lot of people would just be like, well, they only made 20%. Like, no, if you were to use that kind of thing, then that number would actually be 2.2. Like it depends on what number you're starting with, but I think it's not an unintentional manipulation to use the lowest sounding version of it. But in general, like if I invest $10,000 and I make $10,000 above and beyond, which means I start with 10,000 and I end with 20 grand, I'm pretty fucking happy. That's a pretty good ROI. Its 2017 sequel, The Last Jedi, had a multiple of 1.1 times, as did the 2016 spin-off movie Rogue One. However, as the graph below shows, its net profit in dollar terms was half as much as the amounts made by The Force Awakens. Well, yeah, because they did half the revenue. Okay. So here we get this chart. Solo's the only one that actually showing a negative. Disney spent a total of $298.7 million making Rogue One, which was a tremendous gamble as it largely featured little-known actors. Although it paid off with a healthy profit, it could have made even more, as the filings for the movie state that the final cost was higher than the agreed budget. Yet they reshot a fucking half the movie after firing a director. And what the, like, oh, it could have made more money. Well, while that is a very scientific term, yeah, it probably could have had they not gone with the original director and just done everything that they ended up doing initially. Yeah, it would have been cheaper to make. No shit. It's like, does this person even remember that the fact that they fired the director and reshot it? At the other end of the spectrum is Solo, and but still made a 1.1 return, by the way. At the other end of the spectrum is Solo, a Star Wars story, which Disney's only loss-making Star Wars movie. During the production of 2018 Han Solo original picture, directors Phil Lord and Christopher Miller were replaced. We'll see, then we're going to mention that for this one. Were replaced with Oscar winner Ron Howard, who reportedly carried out extensive reshoots, causing costs to skyrocket. Yet those that also happened with Rogue One, by the way. The impact of this is revealed in the financial statements for the production company behind Solo, which say that the final cost is higher than the agreed budget. Again, no shit. A total of $350.4 million was spent on making the movie, which also got $63.2 million of its cost reimbursed, bringing in that spending to $287 million. However, the movie bombed at the box office as came to just $392 million, leaving with Disney an estimated loss of $90.7 million. Aside from this loss, the accolade for the lowest profit and ROI multiple is Disney Star Wars series goes to The Rise of Skywalker. Even though the financial statements reveal its costs were below the production budget, its $112.4 million bottom line brings the total net profits from Disney's 5 Star Wars movies to $1.2 billion, which is $2.8 billion short of the purchase price of Lucasfilm. Okay. This is only factoring box office revenue. No other revenue. But right here, it made $1.2 billion. It's cash positive. And not a small amount either. Bearing this in mind, by the way, like I'm not like I hate the fact that like going after and kind of like correcting the record with these grifters and shit like makes me have to defend Disney. Like I don't like doing that. I fucking hate Disney. I've always hated Disney. But I'm going to do it because I think when it comes to the grand scheme of things, like when we come out and sound like idiots, it doesn't help our cause. Bearing this in mind, it's a little surprised that Disney's presentation didn't work out the return on its acquisition of Lucasfilm by using the profits of the movie, as it still has got a long way to go just to break even. Of course, the calculation above doesn't include the huge profits Disney makes on Star Wars merchandise, DVDs, and Blu-rays. However, it also doesn't include the massive marketing costs for the movies, as well as the cost of the Star Wars streaming shows and theme park attractions, which also don't have revenue streams directly connected to them, as visitors get access to all the rides for the price of a single ticket. Right. And I don't think, like, if you're speaking specifically of Galaxy's Edge, like, I don't think you can pin that on Lucasfilm. That's the park's bad idea. And I don't think that's a reflection of the movies either. It's just bad. Like you didn't put forth your most lucrative, popular characters and stuff in a very expensive theme park expansion at a really shitty time to be expanding your theme parks, given world events that occurred just shortly after. But let's talk about this. So, like, you have when evaluating your company. So here's the things that you're going to have your box office receipts. That's going to be positive revenue, right? Then you have to subtract your theatrical cut, your production costs, which, according to the author of this article, we know the production costs to the penny. I still doubt it. But we don't know the theatrical cut. We have no clue what the marketing cost is whatsoever. Like none. And we don't know if any of those marketing costs are rolled into those production costs under the corporation because it's not itemized that specifically. But when you hear people online estimating whether or not a movie has been successful or whether it made money or lost money, right? It is a wild ass guess because this marketing cost, people just use a generic rule of thumb percentage of the production budget. However, that is not going to be a straight line because for very small cost productions, the marketing is going to be a much larger percent of the production budget because the production budget is so small and marketing expenses are kind of a static thing. Commercial time cost what they cost and have no, it doesn't matter what the movie is. 30 seconds of ad time during the Super Bowl costs what it costs. Um, and some of those marketing costs are absorbed in house. So it's like one division charging the other. So like when Disney puts a trailer on ESPN for halftime, Disney owns ESPN. So it's charging itself for ads. And it's one division billing the other division money, but that, don't think that there isn't some a significant discount there involved. And then on the other flip side of it, for your really ridiculously expensive movies, as allegedly The Force Awakens is, that doesn't necessarily mean that they would spend the same as if they spent $200 million to make a movie. I think the marketing budget is likely to be very similar to the marketing budget if they spent $300 million to produce the movie, because there's a diminishing return on your investment with marketing dollars. Like, yes, you could in theory air the trailer back to back to people. Is that going to get you any more seats in the theater? Probably not. It's probably less because it's going to annoy people. They're going to associate your thing with being annoyed. Right? So like, just using a blank percent of production costs is fine for just rough estimating whether or not a movie is going to make money. But when you're talking about like, did this investment pay off? That's a pretty important number to know. And they have no idea. They could be 50 to 500 to $1 billion off in that number. Who knows? Disney knows because they wrote the bills, but like, unless that financial statement gets leaked, there's no way to know. So you can't factor that in. So, okay, then you have back end royalties, right? Again, these are individual contracts with certain production people. It could be the director, it could be actors. They get a percent cut of the box office, right? Famously, what's his name got a cut for being Obi-Wan Kenobi from the original trilogy, and it was ridiculous. It was an expensive cut. He made a lot of money off of Star Wars, right? Other actors get nothing. Don't know how much JJ made. If he got any back end deals on it, we don't know. We don't know what Harrison Ford got, what percent of the box office he got. And guys, we're talking about movies that have like, you have 2.1, 1.5, and $1.1 billion for the sequel movies, right? Percent differences make substantial difference. All right, so then you have Blu-ray DVD sales, right? Or any other disc variation out there, right? Those and digital download sales. Those, we don't know that number either. And we don't know the costs associated with producing those. So any behind the scene featurettes or bonus things that they put on the DVD, those cost money to make and produce. Like, those don't just like pop out of existence with no effort and no work and no money put into them. They cost money. How much money? Don't know. We'll never know. On top of that, like any books, any books are like the things like Tim and Allura are constantly showing off, like from the original trilogy, and certainly not the sequel trilogy, but like, the things that go into details, behind the scenes information, that's all revenue too. But those also had costs that we don't know. And of course, there's the physical cost of making the disc, and the case, or the book, and all that stuff. And then you get to the licensing. And here's another one that I love this one so much. When people think of Star Wars licensing, they think of one thing and one thing only: action figures, right? And so they look in the stores and they go, look, these action figures didn't sell, so Disney's losing money. Nope. That's not how licensing works, guys. Hasbro has a contract with Disney. And the way those contracts typically work, and this has been publicized in the past, although the current contract I don't believe has been leaked, the terms, so we won't know the specifics. But in general, Hasbro pays an upfront fee for the privilege of being the exclusive maker of Star Wars shit in a particular category, right? In addition to that, they pay a percentage off the merchandise that is sold. This is all, other than the cost of the lawyers making the deal, this is all free profit for Disney, whether it sells or not, because they got their money from Hasbro. Now, you could argue that they could have made more profit by having more popular characters that sold more action figures that they got bigger percentages of. But when that item goes on clearance at Walmart, that ain't even Hasbro paying that bill. That's the retailer getting shafted. Now, you could say that, okay, that might impact how much they buy in the future. Therefore, it affects Hasbro. Therefore, it affects Disney. But that's a couple steps removed, and that's again assuming that the companies are going to assume the same pattern with a different property, right? And what they don't do, these people that love to shop in the toy stores and point at stacks of Disney stuff, and I like some of these people, but what they won't show you is the Lego aisle. Now, why won't they show you that? They got nothing to show because the shelves are empty, because it's Lego and Lego sells. Even Disney Star Wars Lego sells. A lot of it does. Our buddy Rhino blew up a Lego Ray speeder bike from The Force Awakens. That was a fun video. Go to his channel and check that out. That was entertaining, right? How did he get it? Aha. Lego does pretty well. There are not stacks and stacks of Legos like Rose Tico toys in the aisles of toy stores. Not typically. And again, even if there are, that's Lego that's going to take the hit. And boy, do they got enough margin to play with there. Not Disney. Like when Star Wars toys don't sell, Disney doesn't lose money. They just don't make money either, right? And by sell, I mean the retailer buying it from the producer who pays Disney the money and a kickback. And the way it works is like when you see your toys at Walmart, that a Walmart buyer negotiated a contract with Hasbro to supply Walmart with X amount of toys at a given price. Now, whether or not those toys sell at store level determines whether Walmart makes its money. But Hasbro, because they delivered the goods per their contract at the agreed rate, they got their money. The only thing Hasbro has a concern with then is like, if they ain't selling at the store, then Walmart isn't placing supplemental orders to replenish their inventories. That's how that works. So it's fun to go and look and be like, lol, look at all the action figures, look at all these full pegs. They won't show you the empty pegs and they won't show you the Legos. Interesting. And then licensing has a lot to do. There's a lot more to licensing than action figures and even Legos, right? You have t-shirts, apparel, clothing, very high margin. Again, Disney just gets a cut. They're not producing it. They're not paying to make the t-shirts. They're not running factories for t-shirts. These are companies that are going to Disney and be like, hey, we want to make we want to sell Star Wars merchandise. And Disney kind of hands them a contract and they're like, here's the terms. If you want to sell merchandise for us, Disney has some upfront expenses, I'm sure, related to negotiating the initial contracts and then making sure that the company that they're doing business with isn't going to hurt their brand, meaning they're not making Star Wars t-shirts in some sweatshop with, little 6-year-olds, that look like they're starving. And then that hits the news and makes Disney look bad, even though Disney didn't do it, but their name is associated with it. So they have to do their due diligence to make sure that they're dealing with reputable suppliers who are complying with local laws, regulations, environmental regulations, all that kind of stuff, because it does impact their brand name if they're doing business with a bad character. And sometimes companies do all the due diligence in the world and it still doesn't help. They end up still getting fucked over by bad suppliers. That just happens. It sucks. But that's one of the things that's a risk you do in business. And like anybody who's worked for a large company certainly can attest to that. If they've done any sort of purchasing or supplying or worked with any vendors, it could be the vending service that does your trash at your facilities, or some washes your linens for your restaurant. Like it could, like, shit like that can come back and bite you. So you have to be very, very careful. So there is initial cost with initially dealing with the vendor, and then some follow-up costs to making sure that they're remaining compliant and doing all the things that they're supposed to be doing. Very minute, very low risk. They're not investing they're not buying the raw materials to make the t-shirts. They're just taking a cut, right? That's a huge tie-in. And then on top of that, you have a big tie-in, is your food and beverage license tie-ins, right? So new movie comes out. Pepsi does the cans with the Force Awakens thing. Tim, you did a tweet on that this last week or so, saying like, hey, did anybody collect the cans? And I said, yeah, I have the whole set, because I I had a retail display with the case and everything, and I just took that home within the rules. Like, I didn't steal it. Don't call the cops on me for stealing Star Wars shit. But like, no, I have the whole set in its display case. But there's money associated with that, or Star Wars branded cereal, or they stick on a bag of Frito-Lay chips. There's all those tie-ins as well. And generally the way those tie-ins work is like they're neat and all, but like you put Star Wars stuff on a bag of Doritos, the bag of Doritos still sell because it's a bag of Doritos. Like there isn't a whole lot of people that really give a shit. Like, here's an example. Like, there's Gala apples at Costco, and they're packaged with Mickey Mouse on the package, the bag. It's like a 3-pound bag or whatever of just basic bitch apples. But there's Mickey is on the side of it, right? Well, like Disney doesn't own the orchards that are raising the apples, and they don't farm and harvest them. They're just licensed, it's a license deal. So there's revenue associated with that we have no idea and could never know what that is. And then on top of that, you have network licensing. So Turner wants to show The Force Awakens and everything, and I think they did recently. With the sequel movies were on one of the TBS channels or whatever. I saw it at the gym. I didn't watch it. I just watched one of the many other TVs, but it was on. I saw it. Like, they get money for that too, because that TV station's airing advertising during it, and so they're not getting the rights or permission to air the Disney's property without getting a kickback. So that's additional income. With that additional income, there's back-end royalties and everything, and additional costs as well that we don't know. And then you have rental and video on demand income. Again, we can't know. And there's probably a million other things. Certainly the parks we could never know, and Disney Plus we could never know. So what's the bottom, like, all this talk, what number can we know? Not a fucking one. Not really. Not even a good ballpark, really. Because, like I said, even the theatrical box office, boy, you change the theatrical take just a couple of points and you get a big swing. You can't accurately know any of this shit. You can guess and go like, yeah, I don't think Disney made its initial, like, I don't think it made 4 billion back yet, but did it make 1.2 billion? No, it made way more than that. And then the factor is like, do you want to count Galaxy's Edge or not? And again, Galaxy's Edge, like, is still, it's not worth zero. Even the hotel isn't worth zero. Although I think accounting wise, they did take a markdown on it. But like the land it's on isn't worth $0 now. I mean, because that's not how it works. It still has value. There's a building there that has value. So it's not worth nothing. So you can't know these things. And these people can't know these things. But they sure pretend to, don't they? They very much pretend to. So, of course, the calculation above, going back to the article, of course, the calculation doesn't use a huge profit it makes. Again, like the article itself is admitting that it's not including major details, including massive marketing costs and huge profits from merchandise. Well, okay, then what is the point of your article if, like, you're admitting that you don't know and aren't including two major categories? Doesn't that make the whole point of the article kind of irrelevant? Like, if you can't possibly know, and hey, Steve, let's see in the chat, those two major categories, then what can you say definitively? Nothing. Nothing. Likewise, the calculation does include the results of other Lucasfilm franchises. Okay, so now it's going to try and throw in Willow and Indiana Jones, right? Disney lost $134 million at the box office latest Indiana Jones movie and Lucasfilm streaming series based on the 1998 fantasy film Willow was canceled despite the most pouring more than $100 million into it. Lucasfilm also owns the Industrial Light and Magic Digital Effects Studio, though, and is far smaller than its flagship franchises. Yeah, but like, as far as revenue, but like profit, like, you don't know. How could you know? It could be a profit juggernaut. And I'll use this as an example, and it's certainly not a one-for-one example, of course, but like, Amazon makes almost all of its profit from not from shipping you shit from their warehouses. They make jack shit doing that. Their web services, their cloud computing is what generates almost all the profit in that company thus far. It ain't shipping you shit from their warehouses because there's enormous costs associated with that. Web services, though, initial startup capital is very expensive, but the return's pretty damn good. The Star Wars movies are the jewel in the Lucasfilm crown and generate the lion's share of the revenue, which is, of course, why Disney highlighted them in the timeline of this presentation. Well, yeah, and Star Wars is ongoing versus, like, they're not going to go Willow. Like, most people didn't even know Willow was Lucasfilm until the TV series came out. And I'm willing to bet almost everybody still doesn't know that Willow was a Lucasfilm movie. It's not associated with Lucasfilm. People don't think of it as a Lucasfilm movie. Almost in the same way they don't really think of Indiana Jones much of as a Lucasfilm movie, more as it's a Steven Spielberg movie. But anyway, with several Star Wars movies in the pipeline, Disney still has a chance to get its money back through their box office profits. The films have rediscovered the magic formula to appeal to fans, but aren't yet a force to be reckoned with for investors. So there you go. This allegedly is the confirmation that YouTubers were looking for. And going all the way back up to the top and then thinking about everything that we just covered, what new information did this article cover? Caroline, if you're in the chat, please answer. What truth did you reveal? What new information did you provide the public with your article? Not a fucking thing. Not one fucking thing. And the reason I know that is because the YouTube channels have been discussing the stupid additional costs to the Force Awakens thing from the corporations in the UK for weeks, if not months now. Like, that wasn't news to me at all. And you've talked about this in many, many other articles, Caroline. So this isn't new at all. This is old fake news because you've provided no information, no details, no supporting evidence to back up your assertions. This is just purely a speculative opinion piece with some data sprinkled in that doesn't support your conclusions. And this is the confirmation. This is the Disney Lucasfilm has lost money on Star Wars, confirmed. Right? Because that was the name of the YouTube video, right? Let's look that up here, since I won't subject you to my search results live. I'll do it on a different tab. God, just even going to this guy's channel just like irritates me. Let's see, where is it? Disney Star Wars financial failure confirmed. Here's the article. Here's the title. I'll pull it up. We'll just do it like this. There you go. You got to click, but it's going to cost you. Boop. Disney Star Wars financial failure confirmed, all caps dramatically, by Forbes. Bombshell arrives after board vote. And again, I ask, what new information has been provided since after the board vote? The fact that The Force Awakens had a couple $1 million in additional expenses? Pittance dollars? Remember 2015, and it's very difficult to, because it's so long ago, 9 years now, right? The Force Awakens brought in $2 billion. We haven't even gotten to the peak of the MCU yet. That thing's just printing fucking money. Disney Plus doesn't exist yet. Disney, what incentive would Disney have to like mask a few $1 million of additional costs on a movie that netted $2.1 billion at the box office? Like, they've been hiding it for 9 years, and now they had to magically balance the books. So they had no choice but to admit it. Oh, there's a couple extra $1 million on our $2.1 billion box office juggernaut, one of the top movies of all time in the box office, like top 10 for sure. I think even top 5. Certainly at the time, it was top 5. That was before Avatar 2, which these people considered not a Disney movie, by the way. Um, even though it's a Disney movie. Uh, what incentive is there for Disney to hide that very minor difference in budget for The Force Awakens when literally at the time they were like the super darling that could do no wrong? Remember, like, we're talking about a time where like the fandom menace didn't even exist yet. Okay. TLJ is just a thought at this point. It hasn't been made yet. Hi, Wing It Productions. They haven't made. We're years away from that movie even coming out. Force Awakens, $2.1 billion. Rogue One, I think, is the next movie that's going to come out. That's going to do another $1 billion. Like, what is their incentive to like to hide these minute, minuscule in comparison to the box office numbers, additional costs for the last 9 years? Like somehow anticipating that Nutty Putz was going to have some like attempt to get a board seat 9 years later. Be like, well, just in case Nutty Putz comes around 9 years from now, we need to hide these couple $1 million of additional production costs. Otherwise, our stock is going to get impacted by 1 peso for all the shares. But I mean, that's what you'd have to believe. I mean, because that's the angle that they're trying to sell you here, right? All cash after board vote, like implying that like there's some like shady accounting business going on here, and like it literally could be just a back end payment to Harrison Ford that's coming out of that production thing. We don't even know, and they don't even know. Like, and it's a relatively or just a maintenance fee for maintaining the corporation that they've re-upped for 5 years or whatever. Like there's just we don't know the specific cost, but we're supposed to believe or we're supposed to buy their implication that there's some shady Enron level of accounting going on behind the scenes at Disney to mask the true cost, to increase the value of Disney and to its investors to help Bob Iger survive this Nutty Putz takeover attempt. And like I'm sorry if you buy that, you're a fucking fool. Because again, go back to 2015 and tell me how they could possibly anticipate that and like why they would do that given the facts on the ground at the time that they'd hide these numbers in some sort of shady fashion. What was their like, give me the motive? Like literally, they could have come out and said the movie cost an additional $100 million. It would have done. People still would have been like, "Yeah, but it made 2.1. We're good." Because at the time they thought that the Last Jedi was going to do another $2 billion too, and it probably could have had they not fucked Luke over. As much as the Force Awakens, like I don't like it, and like I don't like the trilogy at all, but like they literally just had to not fuck Luke in TLJ, and it probably would have done another 500 million easy. But there were a lot of people that went to see TLJ on opening weekend or opening night and was like, fuck this movie. I'm pissed. And thus an entire movement was born, right? Out of that anger. Had they just not done that, they'd be printing money. Probably. I mean, of course, it's all speculation. We have no way to know. Which again is one of the themes here. Like these people that say very definitively that they know. I will say very definitively that I don't know and I can't know because I don't have access to the data. I have hunches and suspicions, but I certainly ain't going to say like Disney financial failure confirmed and then point to an article that doesn't confirm anything. Like, at all. It doesn't even provide any new information at all. And that's about it, guys. That's kind of what I had to say. We didn't get to it last night, and it certainly was going to be difficult because we went so long on going through the other video. And this stuff is kind of dry. It's not the most exciting YouTube theater that one could possibly watch. It's difficult to make a whole lot of funny jokes or banter with something like this because you're just going over stupid financial data. And I'm not going to put goofy circus music in the background because that's just not my style. But yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to cover. It doesn't really not much else to cover under that, unless anybody else has something in the chat they want to ask about this or specifically like this. Oh, this is the last time I can view this page now. But or if anybody can point to some information in this article that's useful or new, or that confirms anything, that actually uses any real data about anything, I'm waiting. I don't really expect you guys to say it in the chat. There's not many of you there, and you're probably more than likely are agreeing with the things I'm saying. But it frustrates me so much to see a lot of this in this community, and so many people buying it, and worse, regurgitating it. Because that's something that happens a lot too, is like, somebody assertively says something that's just not true, but because they're assertive in the way that they say it, people repeat it confidently. So they're wrong, but they're really, really confidently wrong. And so people believe them anyway. And what I like doing, or I feel compelled to do, is kind of point out, be like, all right, please, like, explain to me the motive for Disney hiding these couple $1 million over the last 9 years. Like, why would they do that rather than just report it up front when the movie made a fuck ton at the box office? Or even explain how, like, the fact that it has ongoing costs can't be explained with ongoing costs associated with back end payments. Never saw a kid playing with a Ray or Finn action figure. I haven't seen a kid play with any Star Wars figures since I was a kid. Just honestly, I have young niece and nephews, like it. But one, the toy industry has changed, and we covered that last night. And two, like some anecdotal thing like that doesn't prove anything necessarily. And it doesn't mean Disney lost money on it. Like, as I explained earlier, like, Disney has very little upfront costs associated with the development of those toys. They have a lot of potential profit on the line, but actual costs where they're writing checks, no, that's Hasbro writing the checks. And that's the retailers writing the checks to Hasbro for the merchandise that they're sitting on and eating. But that's not Disney. When Ray dolls and Tico dolls don't sell in the stores, like, Disney's eating exactly $0. I mean, okay, I'll cry. There is a scenario where Hasbro, in renegotiating the next contract with Disney, would be like, "Hey, we want a better deal because we took a bath on the last one." I guess you could say, well, then it costs Hasbro money or it costs Disney money. But I mean, like, we can't even substantiate like how much money the Hasbro contract is in the first place, or what kind of percentage we're even talking about. So, I mean, another step removed down the line in some future negotiations certainly isn't something we can quantify at this point. But yeah, I will. That's not to say that I think the Disney movies have been successful, and that's because the people that are going to defend this YouTuber and articles like these are going to be like, "Oh, what are you saying? Star Wars made money? Are you stupid?" No, I'm not saying it made money. Well, I will say that I will say that it has made money. I don't think has it made 4 billion? No, I don't think so. Does it need to? No, it doesn't need to because you don't have to pay for the cost of acquisition because the company is still an asset on your books. Like you ever do accounting paperwork or deal with corporate finances, like the ledger's just got to balance, right? So the value of the company that they bought, like if it doesn't go down, then they didn't lose anything. Be like, the value of the stock 3 months ago doesn't determine the price it sells for today, right? If you were to sell your shares in any stock, I'm not talking Disney stock, but any stock, it's not how it works. So you generally don't pay taxes. You don't report that as income or losses until you actually make the sale, and until Lucasfilm actually spins off, or Disney spins off Lucasfilm. That'll continue to be an asset on the ledger that you can't. It'd be very difficult to assess the value of Disney as a company because there's so few buyers out there that have the kind of money that would purchase it. And so you could come up with a value of like, here's the value of all the physical assets. This is the land, it's worth this much. This is the building, it's worth this much. This is how much paper stock and pens they have, that's worth this much. This is what the office equipment is worth this much, and the cameras is worth this much. You could do all that, but that's not the valuation of a company. Like their earning potential and their cash flow and other things determine that not just the value of their physical assets as if you had to liquidate it today. No company would be worth on paper what they say they're worth if you go by the liquidation cost as of today. Because of course liquidation, you're not getting a dollar for a dollar. You're getting, 50 cents on the dollar, maybe. Depending on the circumstance, you might be getting 10 cents on the dollar. So there's a lot of bankruptcies where the creditors are happy with 10 cents. But the people that are claiming to kind of be like these insider business experts and with all these contacts and stuff, you'd think that they would be able to explain some of this stuff in a little bit more detail. And I mean, out here, I'll end the stream by just being very direct. I don't think they're stupid. I don't think they don't know. I think and I believe that their lack of honesty is actual malice. It's intentional deception. So I will not give them at this point the benefit of the doubt if they just don't know better. I think they do know better. I think they're lying and I think they're misleading people and I think they're doing it on purpose for the purposes of their own financial gain. So I will say that like these sites, Caroline, WDW, this whole incestuous link back and forth between the people at Forbes and these group of YouTubers, I think is absolutely malicious in nature and intentionally deceptive. Not criminally, but ethically and morally repugnant. And with that, I will end the stream. Thank you for attending. I will leave this up for a while because I realized there wasn't a whole lot of people in the chat. It's an odd time to stream Saturday afternoon, but I didn't want to go later in the evening because, I want to watch Melvin stream. I don't want to be streaming myself. So probably see you in the chat whenever he goes live, and I'll talk to you guys later.